Okay, so first and foremost, can you also one finger on 35? So find 35 and put one finger or a hand in there. And then 64 at the same time. So when it comes to loans, let's make sure we put our phones away, okay? When it comes to loans, the interest is called finance charges, the cost of borrowing, okay? When it comes to investments, what do we call that? Like interest earned, right? Like it's interest earned. So on 35, I have total interest, as in like you take your future value, you subtract any present value, like this is a big initial amount, and you subtract all the contributions you've made overall. That's how you find the total interest when it comes to investing. So make sure you have this under investments, okay? Then right next to it for borrowing, this is the equivalent of that question, except for we're talking about loaning money, we're borrowing. This is total interest paid. Okay. Interest on a loan, if you want to make a little note, total interest, right here, I would put an arrow. That's a total interest you've paid over the entire loan, the life of the loan. Okay. You have to use that when there are decimal values for your end, and you have to use this. If you rather use sum of interest, which works 99% of the time, right? If you're not solving for n, then you can just use this for the total interest or partial interest or anything like that. Okay, guys? So just remember to make a note of that. When it came to the principal paid, I feel like I didn't give you a formula for that. But look at on page 64. Total repaid to the bank, you can make a formula out of this, right? Total repaid to the bank would be n times the amount of your payment, right? So that's how much you paid them back at the end of the loan. So we figure that out, we multiply those two to figure that out. So I don't know if some of you are able to get this whole thing on your study sheet, but definitely you gotta understand how to figure out, like if I asked you how much principal did you pay, how much principal, like principal is just this amount, right? How much principal of the loan that have you been paying, right? You could figure out the balance that you owe them, right? The balance that you owe them at any given time, and just subtract it from the actual starting loan, and then you'll get how much you actually paid off, like this part right here. So, or you can use this function, the principal function, that is also fine. Okay. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. So we're going to go to mortgages, okay? Page 72, mortgages. And especially for this unit, it's going to be, and you are pretty good at it, but make sure your study sheet gets built up with formulas, right, for this particular unit. And then once we do an exam review, which I'm working on turning old exams into multiple choice exams. So that way, I'm going to assign from time to time for you to go home, do this, bubble in the sheet, and I actually have an app called ZipGrade, and I can just scan your bubble sheet. I'm sure you've heard of it. Some of you that are in chemistry or in the sciences, you know what I'm talking about. I just scan it, and boom, I know right away where you're at overall. It's not fair necessarily, because some of the 2-mark questions, you don't get any marks for work, but I'm not going to necessarily keep track of your mark. I'm going to keep track of whether or not you've done it. Okay, so we're going to develop some sort of a deal there, because I do have a big booklet to do, but I'd rather you do like old exams to prepare. So here we go. Mortgages. Loans given towards real estate and are usually longer term. Okay, so that's what's particular about mortgages. Important concepts would be knowing the difference between appreciation and depreciation, right? What is equity? What's renting versus buying? Like we're going to talk about the pros and cons. Okay, so here we go. For the future value, right? So value of anything in the future. And I alluded to this when I did the loans lesson. You have to take the current value of anything. Could be a gold collection, it could be the value of a car, it doesn't matter. Right? And then you go 1 plus or minus the depreciation or appreciation rate divided by 100 to the power of years. And you may already have this, but obviously I would just say maybe make a note here. Appreciation, we use the plus. Okay, I hope you understand that. Depreciation, something is losing in value over time, you go minus. Okay. And another very important term, so this one definitely should be on there. Equity. When you own a house, the biggest reason why somebody buys a house is to build equity. Like you own more and more of the house as you pay off. And what also happens to the value of the home as time goes by? Hopefully the value goes up and you pay off more. So technically this is the value of the home and the amount owing. If you subtract them, the difference is what we call equity. Okay? It's the difference between what the value is of the home and how much you owe. So as time goes by, it's a two-pronged approach, right? Like both of them are separating, and the more the separation is, the better. This is what you're building. And here's a formula that is going to at first look very ugly, okay? But I'm going to explain that to you. To figure out the equity of a home at any given time, you use what I just did up here, okay? Value of home minus balance owing. And so I'm using words, and now it's going to turn into a formula. Okay, so equity, the value of the home is current value times 1 plus or minus rate over 100 to the power of years. So it's like copy paste of what I did earlier. This whole thing comes in here again. Minus balance owing. How do we figure out the balance owing with our calculator, TVM solver? Balance, and then just years times PY. So that stays the same. So this is your big formula for equity that I would like you to have. I just want to make sure we understand. Why is there plus or minus again? Appreciation and depreciation. Do houses in general appreciate? But don't fall for it. An exam has had one where the market crashed in 2008, the houses went down, there was a 2% depreciation. So we have to make sure sometimes it's minus, sometimes it's plus, so just be very careful when I bring that to you. Okay, equity, that is huge. I want to talk about the advantages for owning. And trust me, they quite often ask for this. Owning a home or condo, because you can do condominium, right? The biggest advantage of actually owning your own place is you build equity. So some people like to own a house because they know that equity is going to build up. So when they sell, they're going to sell for way more than what they bought it for. So it's like an investment, but we call it, when it's a real estate thing, we call it equity. Another reason why people may want to buy is you may own pets. That's a huge reason. Renting is often makes it impossible to own pets. Okay. I would say you may renovate or modify at will. So whenever you feel like it, you can renovate, especially if it's a house. I would say this, not a condo. I will put that down here. When it's a condo, you can't just take down a wall because it's the whole structure of the whole thing depends on it, right? So there you actually have to ask for permission when you do certain renos. Painting the walls, all of that, not a problem. But structural, you can't just go for it, right? So you got to be careful there. This is a big one here. You may stay as long as you want. Nobody can, like a landlord can't just sell the whole block and be like, hey, you're out, like I'm turning this into something else, right? Like they can't, it's yours. So I'm just gonna leave it there. And then I'm gonna make a line for advantages for renting. It requires, there's a lower startup costs. No large down payment required. You may have to put a deposit down, but compared to a down payment for a house, it's very little. Okay. It is easier to relocate. It's not like you can just leave, but it is much easier than putting your house up for sale, having lawyers involved, all of that, right? So it's easier to relocate. Utilities are usually included. You know what utilities are? Water, heating, sometimes even Wi-Fi, internet, right? Utilities are usually included in rent. So you don't have to worry about a big bill on heating your place. It's usually already included. So let's just go water, gas, electricity. And I'm going to end with this, lower maintenance. I may add more as we go along. Lower maintenance. So if your water heater goes, landlord, please replace my water heater. If your roof starts to leak, landlord, please, right? My roof starts to leak, a new roof is like $10,000, $15,000, right? My water heater starts leaking, that's $1,000, right? So it's a lot more expensive if you own. You got to be able to take these and turn them into disadvantages. Can we add one advantage that I forgot to mention about owning is you may have your own yard. And we will always make like a little bracket, right? When it's a house that you're buying, you may have a yard, so that's huge for some people, right? You want to be able to barbecue, have your pets run around, your children, right? You might want that extra space. So, and I will say this: please turn it, make it, customize it to the question on the exam. Sometimes they give you a little story, like so and so is a new student, just graduated from university, wants to find a temporary job in the city. Temporary job in a city, student. Why would you want to rent? I would use, it's much easier to relocate. Being a new student, you might not know where you want to live. So if you rent, easier to move to a different place where a better opportunity for your job arises, or something like that. Just, just throw something in there and make it work, okay? All right, 73. Let's actually do the math part. That is the one. I'm always guilty of having like the whole alphabet there after a question, right? A, B, C, D, E. An exam usually only has A, B, and maybe a C, right? So don't always think that it's going to go this crazy here. 73. So Jose is negotiating with his bank for a mortgage on a house. He's been told that he needs to make a 10% down payment. I don't know if they're going to ask you this, but the minimum, what's the minimum percentage in Canada for down payment? Does anybody know this? 5%. 5% is the minimum. Yeah. And the purchase price is $225,000. The bank will offer a 3.75% interest rate, compounded semi-annually over 20 years, and a monthly mortgage payment is set up. How much will each payment be? I'm quite confident that you should be able to do this part at this point, but there's a bit of a curveball here, and that's the down payment. Okay, got it? Let's do the down payment somewhere on the side here. Down, it's 10% of whatever the purchase price is. In this case, 10% is $22,500. Okay. That is important. So we're going to go back to our TVM solver, and let's start from the bottom. Compounded semi-annually means 2, not 24. Okay, make sure you have this on your study sheet. Payments per year. Monthly payments, right? It does say here monthly payments. So payments are 12. Future value, it's a loan, right? So we're not letting it sit there and just paying it all off at the end. So that's 0. Payment is what we're trying to find. Present value, please show this work here. I'm going to go 225,000 minus 22,500. So I'm adding, I'm making sure that the step that shows the down payment being subtracted is in there. And that gives us 202,500. So we're actually borrowing this amount. Okay, so that's the amount that I want to show in there. Interest rate is 3.75. This is 20 years, right? 20 times whatever PY is, so times 12. That's 240 payments over the 20-year stretch. Let's grab our calculators and you can actually do the subtraction right in here next time. Okay, like that, right? Payment to be determined, 12, and this is 2. Make sure you have these right, because it could give you a totally different answer if you have these ones off, especially PY. So payment, alpha, enter. And so my payment turns out to be $1,197.55. All right. B, how much will Jose have paid off after 12 years. How much will he have paid off? It doesn't say how much does he still owe. It asks how much has been paid off. So I will do this. PV minus the balance after how many years? 12 years, right? 12 times whatever my PY is. So I'm going to take my present value minus, let's figure out what the balance is after 12 years. Quit this screen. You go apps, finance. I'm going to use option 9, and I know that that's 144. This is owing, right? And if you want to put 144 here, that is probably a good idea. So how much you borrowed, how much you're still owing, that's going to give you that amount. If you subtract those two, you get $103,200.21. If you'd like a formula, because some of you love your formulas, right? So you can say amount paid off, right, is simply present value minus balance of years times PY. That tells you how much of your loan you've actually paid off. Okay. That's B. I don't know, B and C should have been switched. You will see if you read, right? What is C asking for? What is the balance owing after 12 years? And I'm just going to copy that number right there, 99,299.79. That's how much is owing. D, how much interest will Jose end up paying by the time the loan is paid off? My favorite is sum of interest. I'm just going to say if I can use any function, I will use it in a heartbeat. Can I use this one? Absolutely, because n is a whole number. So just go 1 to 240. Right? You're going right till from the very first to the last payment period. And let's figure that out. You got to go apps, finance, sum of interest, 1 to 240. It's 84,911.64. Circle it, $sign, and you're good. Or interest paid is N times PMT minus present value. Do I have that here? I do. So 240 times 1197.55 minus 202,500. This ends up being 287,412 minus 202,500. And the answer will probably vary a little bit, which it does. This one is exactly 84,912. So we're off by 36 cents. and that's okay. The reason being is sum of interest uses all decimal places throughout the whole 20 years, versus this one right here doesn't, obviously. It rounds the payment to 2 decimals, right? And then it bases it off of that. So either or. Okay. E, how much will she pay altogether? Will he pay altogether? So E is right here. There's no, 1 second here. I thought I had an equity question, but I don't. Okay, that's fine. E, how much altogether? This is total paid for house. Write this formula down. If you want the total you've paid for the house, at the end of the day, guys, you're like, hey, how much, somebody asks you, like, how much did this thing cost you? Okay? You will say, well, I made N number of payments of a certain amount. And what else will you add to this? The interest? The interest will be in here. But I will just say this, down. Because the down payment, right, you paid that off from your own money. You're like, I'm putting 12 grand towards it. The rest you finance with the bank. And so it's always these two when they ask you how much did you pay in total. So if you want another formula, dun, 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 right? I used to go TPH, but then students were like, exam time, I was like, what's TPH? I don't know what that means, right? So it's, I rather, if possible, write out what it means. So do we know this already? Yes. I'm gonna go get it. It's right here. 287, 412, plus my down payment was 22,500. And that's 309, 912. So at the end of the day, you have to say, because remember, every single payment, folks, listen carefully to this, every payment always has interest in it. So as you're making 240 payments, right? Look at this. If you go N times payment, you end up paying them back 287. How much did you borrow from them? 202,500. So, right, that difference is your interest. So when you go N times payment and you get that number, that's already including the interest you've paid. Okay. F. I hope you still have room. Just when you thought it was done, right? F. This is the one I want you to know for life. I want you to grab your TVM solver when you go to the bank and go and make a informed decision. What does it ask for? Let's read it together here. How much sooner in months would Jose pay off the mortgage if he adds $150 to his monthly payment? He goes to the bank and says, I don't want to pay that. I want to add another $150 every month. Okay? Let's see how that would work out. NI. PV. These are the what ifs. Future value, PY, CY. So compounding stays the same. We're still making monthly payments. Future value, still want it to be 0. And watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go negative in brackets 1197.55 plus 150. That ends up being negative, 1 second, 1347.55. My payment has to be negative, correct? Because I'm paying that to the bank, is leaving you. Present value is still the same as before. Does it make sense that it's positive? Because the bank gave it to you, right, to go buy your house. So it is positive. Interest rate is the same. We're now going to figure out how much sooner we're going to pay off this mortgage. So grab your TVM solvers. And I'll make some changes here. I'm basically going to overwrite this one. And now we're going to solve. Obviously, it should be less than 240, right? If you pay more a month. So let's solve that. You get 202.62. Right? I'm going to go 4 decimals just in case I need this. So for now, I'm going to underline that. It said how much sooner. So we're going to go 240 minus 202.6161. And you get, 1 second. That's 37.3839. So it doesn't say a minimum or something. So we're going to say either 37 or 38 months. This is my answer right here. I'm going to highlight that because it's... How many years would that be approximately? If it's monthly, it's like 3 years sooner. So you're going to be debt-free 3 years sooner by doing that. G. How much would he save in interest with a new payment plan? I will just go interest minus interest, right? So I'm going to go, what is my sum of interest here? Can I do this one? Can I use sum of interest to figure out how much interest I paid here? I can't. So I got to use this one. 202.6161. This is going to be tight, guys. Let me redo this. I need more space. I'm going to do that here. 202.6161 times 1347.55 minus 202,500. I'm going to zoom into that because it's so small. And so that ends up being 273,035.33 minus 202,500. You paid 70,535 and 33 in interest with this setup right here. How much interest did you pay before? Somebody give me that number to read it out loud. What's the interest I paid before under the previous setup? 84. Right? And now 70. So how much money is in your pocket? Like, how much did you save? About $14,000. So I'm going to give this a highlighter here. I'm going to say red and red or pink. So I'm going to say 84,912 minus 70,535.33. Here it is, 14,376.67. I tell you something, if 10 years ago or 15 years ago somebody said, hey, you're going to have $14,000 in your pocket by doing this, it's still a lot of money nowadays. It was a lot of money then. It's still a pretty decent cash amount right now. Okay, so 14,000 is 14,000. And so I want you to learn something from this, okay? If you are able to pay it off faster, you will always save on interest. whatever you can do to pay it off faster. So you can either make a larger down payment, right? Like, where's my down payment? Way up here. You could have said, hey, I'm going to pay 20% down. That will speed up the process. If you can make additional payments, that will speed up the process, okay? So let's go to 74. I'm going to ask you to try that one. Try that one, except for D. If you're not 100% sure what to do with D, I gave you the formula. I would encourage you to try it, but I want you to do this one on your own, okay? You can talk to your neighbor, but make sure you stay on task. So let's see if you can do mortgages. And then once you're done 74, go on to 75 and so forth, okay? All right, to conclude this lesson here, I'm just going to go over this example by showing you the answer key. So in this case, there's a $25,000 down payment. So you've got to make sure your present value. You subtract the down payment, and that's really the amount that's in there. This is happening, the compounding is quarterly, and the way the question is phrased, we know that the payments will be monthly. So we've got 412 here. We've got our interest rate, 25 years. So it's that's an interesting word, the amortization. So that's like how long, how much time this is being spread out over. Okay, 25 years is the amortization. That's the term we use for talking about the amount of time used to pay this back. So 25 years times 12, that's 300 payments. In this case, it's monthly payments. When we do the math, we find out that our payment ends up being $1198.35. Sorry. So that's our payment. For B, give one reason you might choose to buy instead of renting. If they buy, they will accumulate equity, which acts as an investment. You can say that you may own pets, that you can renovate without asking your landlord, especially in a house, and so forth. C, give one reason that you might rent instead of buying. If they rent, they don't have to worry about a large down payment, or they would not have to worry about maintenance costs, or at least maintenance costs would be a lot lower. Okay, and then D, it's asking us to figure out the equity that has been paid. Okay. So equity, we go value of the house in the this is often done into the future. So whatever the value is at that point minus the balance owing. So we go with initial, and the formula usually calls for plus or minus rate divided by 100, and the rate is as a percentage. Okay. So to the power of years minus the balance owing and the number of years times PY. So in this case, we do not use the PV, like how much we borrowed, right? We want to go off of what is the value of the home, because that is not affected by your down payment, right? The value remains 250, so it's growing, starting at 250,000. So this is our interest rate, or the appreciation rate divided by 100. We add 1 to it, we get this. And over on this side, it's 9 times 12. So the balance after 180 months have gone by. You got to be careful here. You got to add 1, raise it to the power of 9. That answer gets multiplied by 250. So you end up, your house is going to be valued at $292,246.80. So obviously this is just an estimation. And then minus whatever the balance is, and this is what the balance is if you use your TVM solver, and that's based on what's in the TVM app. Okay, you subtract it. This is the equity that you're expecting to have. If we look at example 9, which has sorry, I meant to say 8. That one has a depreciation amount, I believe. So we're going to check that. And there you go. This is example 9. And yours, it looks a little different. And so there's a down payment of 10%. We figured that out on the side. So we subtract it from the value of the home. Both are monthly compounding and payments. We figure out the payment, it's $1,825.72. For B, how much will still be owed after 10 years? So it's just 10 times 12. So that's how much will still be owed. And C, it says depreciates, right? The value of the home depreciates. So using the formula, the value of the home will be 1 minus the depreciation rate to the power of 10, because we're talking about 10 years. So the value is this, okay? And then D is asking for the actual equity. So I've already set it up, right? This is the value of the home. After 10 years, this is how much is owed. So the equity is when you subtract those two amounts. And there you have your equity for this question. Hope this helps.